It's been 3 years since the dancing man took her. It was the first weekend of summer vacation. We lived on a quiet county road in a very safe but rural area in Ohio. We had a large backyard that shared two borders with different cornfields. The other two borders were shared with some woods that had a small but healthy creek running through it. My wife, my daughter, and I spent our summers outside enjoying the freedom and safety that felt like a little slice of heaven. It felt so normal. The day felt like the first day of summer is supposed to feel. We were on the porch enjoying our coffee. We were just watching her play. I remember she was picking clover and befriending a host of harmless insects, discussing her summer plans with them and complimenting the way the sun made their wings look. I thought this is what she was doing when I first saw her chatting to something in the woods. We were so safe. Every instinct told me so. He had such a warm and casual demeanor when he stepped out from the tree line. He was old, frail, very thin, even gaunt, and hunched over an old wooden cane. He was dressed in a gray tweed suit and wore a black felt hat with some type of wildflower tucked in the band. Despite his non-threatening appearance and friendly demeanor, the circumstances of his arrival immediately set off every alarm bell and protective fatherly instinct. It felt like reality was bending. Though panic and adrenaline fueled my pace and the path to my daughter was unobstructed, I could not close the distance. It felt like faulty dream logic had seeped into a waking nightmare. I would trip over imaginary obstacles, get turned around mid-step, feel like my shoes were tied together, or like everything was coated in lubricant. I can't explain it. Reality was shattering. I couldn't reach her. I watched in desperation as the man sweetly presented her with the wildflower from his hat, which she gratefully accepted. The man then looked at me with wide unblinking eyes and lifeless grin and began to dance. His dance was unnatural. It lacked rhythm, or any kind of pattern whatsoever. The movement was spasmodic, but felt primal and meaningful. He was unnaturally limber and appeared to be double-jointed in several places. He never blinked or broke eye contact. It was grotesque. I was about to be sick when my daughter slowly turned to face me. Her face had changed. She was wearing the same empty grinning expression as the man. She turned until she was squarely facing me, at which point she briefly paused before beginning to dance. She danced in horribly perfect lockstep with the man. Though she didn't seem to be processing pain, I could hear her joints snap due to the unnatural range of motion the dance demanded. Neither of them blinked or broke eye contact as they backed into the woods together, their movements perfectly synchronized. No trace of either my daughter or the dancing man has ever been found. I never imagined I'd find myself back in my old hometown. Life has a way of circling back, of dragging you to places you thought you'd escaped. We moved here for the quiet life, for our daughter to grow up in a safe neighborhood. But there are ghosts here, shadows of the past that refuse to fade. The house next door had been empty for years. When a moving truck appeared, I didn't think much of it. People come and go, life moves on. But then I saw her Alyssa, the girl who had a huge crush on me in high school, the girl who had died in a car accident during senior year. It couldn't be her. Of course, this woman had a different name and hair color. But those eyes, I'd never forget those eyes. During the day, she was normal, friendly even. She introduced herself as Lisa, a pleasant smile never leaving her face. But at night, everything changed. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, feeling uneasy. Peering through the blinds, I'd see her standing in her window, staring directly at our house, her eyes fixated on my bedroom. I tried to tell my wife, Sarah. She laughed it off at first, calling it an overactive imagination. "You're just stressed," she said. But as the nights went on, I saw Lisa more often. She never moved, never blinked, just stared with those dead, unblinking eyes. I went to the police, but they thought I was crazy. "Your neighbor hasn't done anything wrong," they said. "We can't arrest someone for looking out their window." I even tried to confront her. to ask why she was watching us, but she'd just smile that same empty smile and deny everything. One night, I woke to a sound, a creaking floorboard, the kind that groans under the weight of something or someone. I reached over to wake Sarah, but she wasn't there. Panic set in as I rushed downstairs. The living room was empty, but the front door was slightly ajar. I stepped outside, the cool night air biting my skin, and there she was. Lisa was standing at the edge of our yard, still as a statue. Sarah was beside her, eyes wide and vacant, as if in a trance. I shouted her name, but she didn't respond. Lisa turned her head slowly, her eyes locking onto mine, and she whispered something to Sarah. My wife turned, walking back towards the house, her movements stiff and unnatural. "Sarah, what are you doing?" I called out, my voice trembling. She didn't answer, just walked past me and into the house. I followed her, heart pounding in my chest. She went upstairs, back to our bedroom, and laid down as if nothing had happened. I stood there, helpless, as Lisa's voice echoed in my mind. "She belongs to me now," it whispered, cold and final. The next morning, Sarah remembered nothing. She laughed off my concern, but her eyes ... Something was different. Every night, the staring continued, but now Sarah would join her at the window. They'd stand there, side by side, two shadows against the moonlight. I was alone in my own home, trapped in a nightmare no one else could see. And then, one night, Sarah didn't come back inside. I searched for her, calling her name until my throat was raw, but she was gone. The police found no trace, and I was left with nothing but the image of her and Lisa, side by side, staring into the darkness. Now, I sit by the window every night, waiting, watching, hoping that somehow, this nightmare will end. But deep down, I know the truth. Alyssa, Lisa, whatever her name is, has taken everything from me, and I'm next. Beware the light-eyed ones. That's what my grandma had always said to my mom, aunts and uncles, and eventually to her grandkids and great-grandchildren. My grandfather always thought it was strange as well, but he died years before I was born, in a car crash. My mother had told me that her mom had proudly told her and her siblings that she made sure they all had brown eyes once they were born, and even did the same to myself, all of my cousins, my younger brother, and my 3 younger second cousins. Apparently my grandma practically had to fight with the doctors a few times while trying to get to a few of us to make sure our eyes were brown or hazel. Every one of us do, in fact, have shades of brown eyes, from very dark brown, to medium, to light brown, to amber, to hazel eyes with a little green flecks. She also threatened to disown one of her sons when he dated a green-eyed girl when he was a teenager. She demanded that they all only dated people with brown eyes. Hazel with green flecks was the only exception to her. She also told her kids that any friends they brought over were to have brown eyes as well. She always made sure us grandkids did the same. Anytime she came across someone with blue, green, or gray eyes, she would get a terrified look on her face and get away from them as fast as possible. She would never even go out to family restaurants unless she knew the waiter or waitress had dark eyes. No one ever truly knew why, and whenever she was asked, she would just say the same phrase every single time. Beware the light-eyed ones. That is, until I went to visit her on her deathbed a few days ago. Multiple family members had come and gone to say their goodbyes to her already. She was 86 when she passed. Looking at her frail body and pale skin while she laid on that bed brought tears to my eyes. Besides her weird obsession with people having brown eyes and avoiding those who didn't like they were a disease, she was a great woman. She always had fun stuff for us grandkids to do when we visited her and was otherwise delightful. She had not a single racist or homophobic bone in her body. She just had something against light-eyed people. When I sat down beside her, she grabbed my hand as tight as she could and told me how much she loved me and that she had to tell me something that she couldn't even tell her husband friends, or even her own kids. I was surprised by this and happily agreed to listen to her get whatever she held back for so long off of her chest to me. But after listening to her story, I am terrified. Here is what she said to me before dying to says later. As you know, I have never been fond of non-brown-eyed people in my life. I know it's been a mystery to so many of you for years now, and now that I am on my way out, I am finally able to be at peace knowing they can never get me. When I was little, almost everyone I knew had dark eyes in the town I lived in. There were a few that I knew who had light eyes, but they were rare. One day on my way to school when I was in 3rd grade, a young man and woman were just standing in my path, smiling down at me. They both looked to be around 25 to me. They both had very beautiful light eyes. The man had eyes as green as emeralds, and the woman had eyes the color of a blue sky mixed with silvery gray. I smiled at them as I attempted to walk around them, as I knew to not make small talk with strangers. Yes, we were taught that even back in those days. But as I tried to walk around them, I felt hands grab me from behind as I was then thrown to the ground. Before I could even scream, I was put into a chokehold by the man as the woman stared down from above me, those smiles still plastered to their faces, and their lifeless light eyes staring down at me as the world faded to black around me. When I came to, I found myself tied to a tree and gagged in front of the lake in my town, where I learned to swim. As if on cue, the man and woman emerged from some other nearby trees, and for more people followed behind them. They all stood in front of me with blank expressions on their faces, and they didn't blink. I noticed something that they all had in common. They all had light eyes. The first man had green, the woman had grayish blue, another man had plain gray, another woman had baby blue, another man had greenish blue, and the last woman had dark blue eyes. After a few moments, the man who choked me out stepped forward and bent down so his eyes were in front of mine. He then pulled out a silver spoon from his pocket and told me that I needed to get my new pretty eyes so they could have a child in the new world that he is starting. I still remember the fear I felt as he brought up the spoon inches from my left eye as the other 5 people simply smiled and watched. But just before the spoon touched my eye, I heard a gunshot. The man stopped, dropped the spoon, and fell down to his side. Dead. The other 5 people tried to run off, but more gunshots rang out and they too all dropped one by one. Several hunters were out that day hunting duck and came across what those freaks were doing and knew they had to take action and began firing from a short distance. They ran out from their hiding spots and untied me and settled me down as much as my hysteric self could be. I was reunited with my parents and siblings later that day as we all cried together. My mom said she would never let me be again. One woman who was shot survived, and after being interrogated for hours, she admitted that they were a small group called the Light-Eyed Ones. They wanted every person in the world to have long, brown eyes, and they would do anything to make that happen. They had stalked me for weeks and planned to kidnap me, take out my eyes and put in glass eyes with blue irises to make me perfect. She was sent to a lonely house. She was deemed insane by doctors, where I think she spent the rest of her days, as far as I know. But not long after that happened, as I was returning to normal life as best as I could, I found a note on my dresser one day that said the other light-eyed ones are still around and would grow in numbers and would make me join them soon. I never told anyone and threw it away as I didn't want my parents to know, and I was still just a little girl who didn't want them to freak out again. I was homeschooled after that day as I feared a light-eyed one would appear in my school and kidnap me while the other kids watched in horror. That is why I've never trusted them. Any of those damn light-eyed ones. I have been on alert for many decades. Years of nightmares, them staring down at me with those cold light eyes. Years of fear and paranoia. But at least it will be over soon. I was so shocked by her confession, but I held back, and so I hugged her as she began to sob after she finished her story. As I left later that day, I came across a blue-eyed nurse who smiled at me. And I felt fear. And as I hurried past her, I swear she mumbled under her breath, You will join the light-eyed ones one day.